Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Friday evening. Sorry we're a few minutes late. I had my whole new studio set up, and right when Doug got here, it decided not to cooperate. How you doing tonight, Mr. Gibbs?
I'm doing well, sir.
Glad to hear it. If you want to launch into, well, first of all, a little bit of announcement. Our good friend Andrew is not going to be with us tonight. He is on an airplane flying to Florida to pick up his wife and family and bring them to Tennessee. So he's a very happy man. We will miss him tonight. I had some links set up on my other computer that I'm going to reach over and get over to this computer. So if you want to open up with a topic or two, you'll have my undivided attention in 30 seconds.
All right, very good. All right, well, let's see. I think the headline then I want to start with, and when it comes to the United States Constitution, me being Mr. Constitution, of course, this is going to be important to me. Article 6 of the Constitution indicates that that the United States Constitution is the supreme law of land. In the Virginia Ratifying Convention, international polities is discussed. There's a concern that international agreements, treaties, and polities will try to control the United States. You got to remember, the United States, America, was founded during a time in which the world was filled with, for lack of a better way of putting it, empires who wanted nothing more than to gobble up the United States and control its resources, and kill its idea of liberty. Because, this thing about liberty, why that tells the people they might, have a voice. We can't have that. So this idea of international polities having any say whatsoever over our country was rejected during the convention, and that same argument was regurgitated during the Virginia Ratification Convention. Now, we've all heard about World Health Organization and the potential treaty that might happen if there's another thing that happens in which everybody gets sick and falls over or whatever. Now we've got another headline that kind of ties into that idea, and it's very frustrating for these people because, see, Bill Gates is concerned that people will refuse to live in poverty to fight climate change. That's the headline. Here's the quote by Gates at an event in India on March 1st. I don't think we can count on people living an impoverished lifestyle as a solution to climate change. Meat consumption in India will be less. That's wonderful. Will all Indians become vegetarians? Will all Americans become vegetarians? I wouldn't want to count on it. Anybody who wants to evangelize that, they're welcome to. I won't resist in any way. Gates has been pushing for rich Western countries to start eating synthetic beef as he buys vast swaths of American farmland. During an online interaction on Reddit earlier this year, Gates pushed for the widespread adoption of non-animal meat products. Well, it just makes you hungry, doesn't it? For people who want to go vegan, I suppose that's fine. And I've got people in my life that are vegan, vegetarian, whatever. I don't even know what the difference is. But I do have people in my life that either don't eat meat, or they only eat certain types of meat, or just eat fish or whatever, or eggs or dairy or whatever. And you know what? I believe in liberty. You want to do that? Knock yourself out. But if I don't, I shouldn't be forced to. Liberty is all about choice. I should be able to choose. And the market should be able to put on the shelves what the market does. Now, obviously, once again, there are some laws that are things that are absolutely harmful that we do, as a community, disallow from, being on the shelves. Such, for example, Coca-Cola no longer has cocaine in it. For some people, that might be an overstep. I don't know. But for me, I'm okay with that, because there are going to be certain things in society where the consent to the governed, we give our consent to be a part of it. We say, you know what, that's one thing we can't do. But does that apply to something like meat, especially when the majority of the population says, whoa, wait a second, that is ridiculous? Is that something that government should be able to do? And let me go even further. Is that something that global government should be able to say, hey, America, we've decided you should not be able to eat meat, or you should have to lock down, or you should have to wear a medical device in your face because we say so. There is no whatsoever authority for any outside entity to dictate to us. Why? Two things. Number one, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. No outside law can supersede our law of the land. Number two, it is an issue that isn't even authorized to the federal government, which means it belongs to each state. So not only can these international entities not exceed the Constitution, they cannot exceed state sovereignty. The states making their decisions on these issues. States come first. Localism, our government, our people, our decision comes first. The problem now is this. Those people have infiltrated the governments, I'm saying, have supremacy. So in other words, now the enemy is within. And they say, well, we're deciding within, so it's okay. No, it's a foreign invasion. It's a foreign entity who has inserted itself into our system, dictating that foreign ideas supersedes what we want, what we say, what our Constitution stands for. And in the process, they're doing things like, once again, buying up farmland, the largest private farmland owner in the United States, owning 270,000 acres of farmland in 19 states is, you got it, our good friend, Bill Gates.
He's not the only one.
I know China and all that, but believe it or not, he's got even more than they do. Well, he says he's worried about energy consumption. He calls on governments to implement strict laws to limit the use of, and maybe even to completely ban things like air conditioning, because it's good for the climate. But as India gets warmer and warmer, he says, I'm betting the demand for air conditioning is going to skyrocket. Well, first of all, once again, now we're on that climate change thing. And I was actually in a conversation today after an event in Fallbrook. I went to lunch with a ladies group, a women's group there, and that subject came up. And what I said was this. I believe in climate change. It's called the four seasons. It's a natural phenomenon. You're right. The planet may get warmer and it may get cooler, but it's not because of air conditioners, SUVs, or cow farts. It's because the sun and natural phenomenon in addition to the sun adds up sometimes to things getting warmer and cooler. During the Revolutionary War, they were going through a mini ice age. They were at the tail end of it. And that's why the Delaware River was frozen, and Washington and his troops had to fight their way through the ice to get across it. And guess what? There was no air conditioners, no SUVs. Okay, so maybe the cows are farting. But aside from that, all the other stuff was not happening. Why? Because the temperatures do this naturally. One other thing about climate change, and this is just a real quick side note, real science, and I'm talking scientists that have been rejected by the science community that agrees with the people who give them money, say that the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere going up and down lags behind the change of temperature. In other words, carbon dioxide does not cause a change in the temperature globally. The change in the temperature globally changes the levels of carbon dioxide in the air. It's the exact opposite of what they're telling you. They're lying to us. I know. It's a surprise.
I got a bit of good news for you.
You got good news? Bill Gates has hemorrhoids.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm not a proctologist. I can't tell about those things.
Yeah, well, sometimes I feel like a constitutional proctologist because I'm always trying to pull everybody's heads out of their butts. But anyway, go ahead.
What I pulled up here on the screen is the all-time stock chart for Beyond Meat, which is the biggest of the fake meat companies. Okay. You can see from the chart, it's gone from a high of almost $250 a share to the current price of $17 a share. So it's down over 90%.
It looks like one of those slides at one of those water parks.
Yeah, and that's been going on for about 2 years. It's telling you the market can't stand this stuff, which is kind of a good thing to know.
Yeah. Well, I honestly, if I have eaten meat that wasn't really meat, I didn't know it. I'm pretty sure I have because I eat Taco Bell tacos. But that's beside the point. Um,
I've had good veggie burgers. I used to buy Boca burgers,
okay, yeah.
but
Well,
I'm
I had a friend of mine who used to have the fake meat, and she convinced me, and she says, "Well, what really makes a burger a burger is all the other stuff you put on it. The meat's a minor part of it." And I took one bite, and I'm like, "No, that's not it." I disagree.
well, you
And
actually
I'm a double triple burger kind of guy too. But
you also have to put all that other stuff on it to make a veggie burger taste good. I mean, or as good as look. I hate to say this, but I can't eat red meat, and it sucks because I really do miss it. But
yeah. Matter of fact, I remember we've had a conversation. You were when you could eat the red meat, a huge fan of double cheeseburgers from
oh,
Mickey D's, right?
I was a cheeseburger kid growing up. That was my favorite food by a long shot. But no, I'm good with a good turkey burger. And I used to have an office in downtown San Diego, and there's a place that had ostrich burgers, and that's something that's supposed to be really high in protein. So
Yeah.
that was actually
Well,
pretty good.
I hear it's good for you, but and I'm sure, and once again, I'm not giving anybody hell that's into that. Liberty, go for it, knock yourself out, but don't make me do it.
So you talk about the carbon being trailing carbon trails.
Yeah, the carbon levels lag behind the change in temperature.
Yeah, and that's one of the easiest ways to debunk that, and it's been done, for more than a decade. We've known this. In fact, it goes back to about 2006 study. The whole idea that carbon is the control knob for the entire climate, it's an amazingly complex system, and I think the best way I've heard it phrased is we're in the infancy of our understanding of how the climate actually works.
Mm-hmm.
They leave out major inputs in the models like solar rays, solar flares, the big sun, and cosmic rays,
Right.
which are going through us right now. Those ebb and flow. They impact the climate. There's a bunch of other inputs, but to assume that carbon, which is a very minor gas in the atmosphere, is the control knob for everything is asinine. The guy who came up with the theory, the greenhouse gas theory, was a professor right down the road here at UCSD. Now he remembers having a student named Al Gore who took one class in climate science and got a C minus, and has taken that one little C minus and taken it to become a multimillionaire, a politician. The whole thing wrote on that. This same professor would later say, no, the theory was wrong. You guys didn't use it right. He completely disowned the entire, the whole, what is it? CAGW, catastrophic anthropogenic global warming. And one last point on this is a lot of scientists don't agree. The people that talk about the consensus is because they've been going through the peer review process, which is completely bastardized, just like it is in many other fields these days, where people that disagree with the mainstream science don't get to have an opinion. They don't get to publish. And we saw that in the ClimateGate emails in 2009, where these supposed scientists were spending hours a day emailing, how can we shut down someone with a bad opinion? The IPCC report, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They do what's called an AR report, assessment report, every few years. They'll get a bunch of scientific papers together, and some of it's good science. And then what they'll do is they'll have a political team condense it down to a very small report, and that's the one that goes to the politicians and the policymakers. So basically, they're not actually reading the real science. They're not looking at the actual abstracts and the studies. They get the summary report. And from that, we basically are going to neuter the entire world economy. It is ridiculous. It is a scam. It always has been.
Well, and you mentioned earlier that carbon dioxide is a minor gas in our atmosphere, and it is. And in fact, Alan Myers does a fantastic presentation regarding this. He has the number that I don't have. But it is a minor gas, and our contribution to this minor gas is minuscule. And when I say less than 1%, that's not even saying it the best way I should, because it's a minuscule percentage of 1%, less than 1%, very small amount that we influence. And the way I like to explain it to try to help people understand is thinking that our contribution to carbon dioxide in the system is going to destroy the planet is like worrying while you're riding a Harley that a fly hitting you in the helmet might knock you off your bike. You may notice, maybe, and that's about all the effect it'll have. One of my favorite commentaries on this, and this person is not a conservative by any stretch of the word, but I love what he had to say, was George Carlin. The earth was here long before we were, and it'll be here after we're gone. And it'll shake us off like a bad case of fleas. And, you know, while I don't necessarily fully exactly agree from a theological point, I get what he's saying. And he's essentially right. For us to think that we have the capability of influencing God's creation with less than 1%, a minuscule percent of 1% of carbon dioxide in the air is pretty narcissistic of us.
Yeah, and then we got to talk about, okay, so why would anybody want to push this alleged hoax, you know, and change the world? And it's really important to understand that this ties in to this Malthusianism eugenics type of the concept of resource scarcity. The first person to propose peak oil was in the 1870s, and it was pushed forward. He wasn't the guy who came up with it, but a guy by the name of Rockefeller, of all people. And the idea was, if you know, to give the appearance that oil is scarce, you drive up the prices. Resource scarcity has been used for a couple of centuries now by these people that want to have all the resources for themselves.
Supply and demand, folks. Supply and demand. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, but it's also Malthusianism. It's dystopian. You know, it's always been a global grab for resources. That this is the mercantilist way, and that is what this entire movement has been. You know, it's just a way to go back to feudalism.
All right, two more things just for the audience that has to do with food. And number one, let me pop open another Dr. Pepper just for everybody.
That's not actually
that's my thing.
That's not actually food. That does not qualify.
Oh, okay. Well, how about this? When I get a lefty in my face talking about how I'm damaging the system by eating meat, my response is, wait a second. I'm eating the creature that causes all the methane you're complaining about. I'm helping get rid of them. You should be thanking me. Okay.
How's that go over?
I don't get the laugh I expect or hope for. Not yet, anyway. I'm sure eventually there's going to be someone with half of a sense of humor, but
yeah, you got to chuckle.
And you know, I will say this. I remember years and years and years ago. It was a long time ago, and I took someone out on a date for our first date. Just met her, and didn't know she was a vegetarian. I took her to a steakhouse. Take a guess on whether or not there was a second date.
I'm going to guess no.
So yeah, it's funny too, because I've talked to a handful of folks that are vegetarians or something of that nature, and I've had a couple of them just say, well, I do miss steak. Steak was so good. Yeah. I've had a couple of them say that to me before, but
my car still swerves when I drive by a McDonald's. I smell. So we got some really interesting news this week. It was a huge news week, and we got a couple stories.
You know, it's funny too, because I've got a whole list of stuff, and yet my list is not even close to comparing to some of the stuff you've got.
Well, let me jump into one of the big ones.
Okay, let's do that.
The J6 Proud Boys trial paused as a defendant attorney alleges the FBI altered evidence. Isn't that a violation of the Constitution, Doug? What is that, amendment number 6?
Well, yeah, Sixth Amendment. Well, they've been violating 4, 5, and 6 through this whole trial and all of these trials with this 6th day of the first month stuff. But when you get into the Sixth Amendment, this is what it says. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. Well, speedy just went out the door. By an impartial jury, that's been out the door, of the state district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. What this does is part with facing the witnesses is the evidence that those witnesses have. That's a part of that. That's where it violates the Sixth Amendment. So, in other words, if you're a defendant, you have the right to face the witnesses against you, and that includes all of the evidence, the evidence that is there. You're supposed to have access to it, to see it, and it's supposed to be presented. Now, if it is being, what was the word they used that they did? They
let's jump into the article.
Altered it and destroyed some. Well, then there's no opportunity for the evidence to be put forth.
Yeah. So they paused the trial on Thursday, and I was
stop right there. Paused it?
Oh yeah.
Now, because I've been asked this, well, Doug, what do you mean by pause? Well, when you do a mistrial, you don't just suddenly declare a mistrial. It's not like it is in Hollywood on movies. There's a process. It needs to be paused so that the judge and the teams that are involved can look at everything and determine if, in fact, it needs to be, there needs to be a mistrial. They don't just suddenly go, okay, mistrial, and everybody walks out of the courtroom like you see on TV. So that's why it's paused. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry.
Taking your notes to keep track?
No, it's Pizzola. Okay, Pizzola is the defendant. He's one of the Proud Boys. He's on trial for obstruction and conspiracy charges. There are a couple emails between FBI agents casually discussing altering a document and destroying hundreds of pieces of evidence. It's very disturbing, and right now we have more questions than answers. There's more. In the Nordian case, one of the other defendants, confidential attorney's client trial defense strategy and position was wrongfully obtained by the government, about which was overheard, shared, utilized, where potentially 338 items of evidence were ordered to be destroyed. Are we supposed to be destroying evidence?
No. That's a part of you being able to face a witness. How can you face a witness if it's been destroyed? Or a witness against you, should I say?
So we've basically got an FBI trying to frame people. Now, there's more to the story because apparently there were more.
And I've got this article, and thank you for sending it to me because I did get a chance to read it. And folks, you're in for something very interesting. Go ahead.
Well, there's more to this because apparently we found out this week that the FBI had informants and operatives at the highest levels of the Proud Boys planning the quote-unquote J6 event.
You mean they infiltrated?
Oh, bingo. But it looks like
the hell you say.
Yeah. Long story short, this thing is just blowing up. I was listening to the War Room, Steve Bannon, Thursday morning, when Alex Jones came on and was breaking the story. And that was literally the best 15 minutes of War Room we've had in 2 years.
Okay.
They also have more videotape released from that magic day. All the videos that was released to Tucker Carlson, that Kevin McCarthy, true to his word. Tell you what, we had a lot of doubts about him as Speaker of the House, but he's followed up on everything he promised so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we live in California. We know who he is, but, thus far, you cannot complain that.
And matter of fact, as a part of that video, and this is a different thing you talk about later, the horns guy that we probably don't want to say the name of on the air since of where this goes, told demonstrators to go home, remain peaceful. We are not Antifa.
Yeah, I think I might be able to find a video of even better than that one that just came out today. So up here it is. Let me share this one.
Yeah, and it also shows feds breaking windows and then blaming and bullying protesters. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
Give me 1 second. Am I sharing it? Oh, okay, I need to share this tab instead.
There we go.
Can you hear this?
Yeah.
We're going to obey our president. We're going to do as he asks.
Respect the landmarks. Respect the Capitol. He said he saw on his Twitter account.
We're going to pull up the tweet. Donald Trump has asked everybody to go home.
We're staying.
Okay, then stay, motherfucker. I don't give a shit. This is
Leap.
America. You guys want to stay? That's fine. Donald Trump has asked everybody to go home.
Yeah, hold on, wait, read this. Hold on. Here, read this. this. This is read it.
Donald Trump is it? Donald Trump, quote, I am asking for everyone in the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect our law enforcement,
Yeah.
men and women in blue. No. Pull up the video. There's a video. Yeah, he has a video. He just tweeted it. Stop fake news. I'll put it on here. Right here.
You want me to do there's one more minute. You want to play it all the way through?
No, I think we got the gist without playing the whole thing. So this person who has been accused of being the leader of a violent insurrection was on a bullhorn calling for peaceful demonstration to respect the monuments that are a part of this place in government, important place in government. The Democrats will call it sacred because they think government's God. I don't think the word sacred is proper, but they are important. And so we are getting an entirely opposite story that we've been fed. Now, you and I, and when I say you and I mean Brady and I, and you, the audience, and I, this is no surprise to us. I've been saying all of this since day one, that and matter of fact, on politicalpistachio.com, I actually put out there a timeline at one point. I think it was on January 17th that I put it out there, indicating, showing the timeline. Because I talked to over a dozen people I knew who were there, who told me how long it took them to walk there, what time they arrived, that most of the people, there were so many people, it took longer than it would normally, at what was going on when they arrived, and so on and so forth. And so within a week and a half after it had happened, I had the full timeline on my site explaining to people all of that. And nobody listened. Now we are finding out exactly what we were saying all along in the beginning is the way it was. And I'm actually, I want to do this real fast if I've got it here. I think I do. All right. So 12 p.m., Trump's speech begins. 1 p.m., the outer barricades are stormed by protesters. 1:10 p.m., Trump's speech ends. So first of all, the barricades have been stormed before he's even done talking. 1:30 p.m., Capitol Police overtaken at steps of Capitol. That's 20 minutes after the speech ended. 1:41 p.m., arrival of first Trump speech attendees, and that would only be those who did not stop to use the bathroom, grab a bite to eat, go to their hotel first. The earliest ones. They just walked immediately to the Capitol the moment the speech was over. On average, most of them took about 40 minutes, but there were a few that took 20 to 25 minutes because they just went straight there and they were ahead of the crowd. And I talked to a couple of people, and that was the case. 2:15 p.m., Capitol building actually breached by protesters. Between 2:50 and 3 p.m., likely earliest arrival of Trump supporters from rally who heard Trump speak, if they lingered, grabbed a bite to eat, or went to their hotel rooms. So that's where the biggest bulk of the people showed up after the Capitol building had actually been breached. So, and I know this is old news, but I want to go over this because I want to remind us we knew this. Now we've got video showing us, first of all, that there was a specific group that was violent. Then others showed up later. And then when you watch the video later on, if you get a chance to watch on Tucker or whatever, what you see is a peaceful demonstration. And then a person, the guy with the horns, who is said to be the violent leader, is now in this video we just watched saying, oh, by the way, everybody, now that some of you are showing up, let's be peaceful. President Trump said, let's be peaceful. We're not Antifa. We're not those kinds of people. So, of course, we've been given a bill of goods that just isn't accurate.
Well, it's so inaccurate. We had Karine Jean-Pierre and our Attorney General, Merrick Garland, just this week talk again about 5 police officers being killed that day.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, what was the actual number of police officers killed that day?
Zero.
Yeah, Brian Sicknick died 2 days later from a stroke, and 4 others miraculously committed suicide. And that's the question we have never really looked at.
Yeah, it's an awful
What-
lot of suicides when it comes to certain people.
Yeah, this is
And there is,
the
of course, that person too. Yes.
this is the bracelet I wear. Ashley Babbitt's mother, Mickey, who I consider a friend, gave this to me, and I have not taken it off since. People always
Except to
think,
show it on camera.
well, I had to. There you go. It's technically still on. And Roseanne Boylan is the one who was bludgeoned to death by a cop with a fire extinguisher. We have that on videotape. And yet they're still prosecuting these. Tucker and the reaction on Tuesday morning was pretty interesting. You had the media going ballistic, calling Tucker a liar. He can't be trusted. You had every Democrat politician running to the podium, trying to discredit it. You also had some Republican politicians trying to discredit Tucker Carlson. And I think I know we're keeping a list of who they are because they have basically revealed their colors.
Adult temper tantrums because they don't want to be caught in their lie.
Well, yeah. And now here's where it gets interesting. On Tuesday night, they were basically threatening Rupert Murdoch. They said, we've got to take down, you can't let Tucker go on the air Tuesday night. Allegedly, Tucker is he had some people that had done some facial recognition work on the people that actually did commit violence. And, a lot of us think that those were Antifa, other plants, operatives, what have you. There's also long been a report that's pretty well documented that there were Ukrainian operatives in that crowd that day that were part of that violence. They don't want that. And Tucker did not release it that night. He did, he kept on the story. And obviously Tucker's just finished, so we haven't watched it tonight. But I'm guessing they had some pretty interesting meetings on Tuesday at Fox News. I consider Fox News a lot of times controlled opposition, but Tucker he's been really hot on the truth he's getting better.
What he does, he skates the edge as close as he can without getting in total trouble. But the other thing is, he's their biggest show. They'd be foolish if they were to get rid of him because he was touching too close to the truth, and everybody knew that. Fox would completely die as a station, and then wherever he would go, they would become the new superstar in media. So they're not stupid. Now that said, I agree that he was probably told to back off a little bit on certain things. Now we'll see whether or not he does that. Now here's what's funny, and this is my prediction. Whatever Tucker has made sure he was too careful about, Jesse Waters might actually just decide to run with. I'm just saying.
Jesse's
I like that kid.
He's been doing some pretty good work. You got to give him credit. He's got a great sense of sarcasm too.
Yeah.
I appreciate a lot of his tongue-in-cheek comments.
Yeah.
I don't watch him as much as I do Tucker. Tucker's one of the two people I never miss, him and Dan Bongino.
Yeah.
And Bongino's all over this story as well. But yeah, this is a big deal. It shows how badly that the Leviathan. Let's just start using the term Leviathan. That's
one of Bannon's favorite words, as long as Bongino and what's his name? The kid from Turning Point.
Oh, Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk, yeah, he calls it a Leviathan quite a bit. So I've started using it, and I think it's because of Charlie Kirk. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it shows you just how badly the Leviathan is. They're scared right now. The truth's coming out.
Oh yeah,
because
there are some nervous people.
That narrative. The next question is, why would you stage what you did? Why would you have to make it seem like a insurrection, etc.? And the answer is, what did it stop? And it stopped the proper procedures of the Electoral Count Act.
Well, I've got two words: Reichstag fire.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. And for those of you who don't know, that was basically a fake fire. Well, it was a real fire, but basically it was planted by the Nazis as an excuse to seize more power. And we've got these terrorists running in our streets. We need to clamp down on security. It's they're not the first, they're not the last to use that kind of tactic. Yeah. We got more big stories if you want to move.
You just kind of froze there. We'll wait until he unfreezes if it happens quickly.
Move off from this because
there we go. You froze for a second, so I actually told the audience I'd wait until you unfroze. So you said we have some big stories, and then you went, so I didn't hear anything after that.
Yeah, I think that's what happens when I click away.
Okay.
So we got a major filing in Missouri versus Biden case. Doug, if for those who don't know what Missouri v. Biden is, you want to give a quick description?
Go ahead, because I got it wrong the other day.
Basically, the attorney
I confused it with another case, but go ahead.
The attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana filed suit against the Biden administration, and they got the right judge, and they were able to basically prove that many government agencies were using their power to censor their political enemies. They did this by threatening social media companies and other media outlets. This has all been verified with the Twitter files that are coming out. And boy, if you didn't see Matt Taibbi on the Congress floor, you missed something. The Democrats are trying so hard to get him to give up his sources, and which is First Amendment violation. Anyone? Taibbi just chewed these people alive. It was a brilliant bit of testimony. But anyways, we know that the government, you get a politician out there that says to a big tech company, we're going to take a look at Section 230, which is a multi-billion-dollar subsidy to a tech company. They're going to censor who you tell them to. Anyways, when Missouri v. Biden, the judge said, you've actually proved your case. He gave them expedited discovery. The government's been fighting every step of the way to try to keep people like Jen Psaki, Tony Fauci, others from testifying, but a lot of them have already testified. And a lot of those depositions have been made public. They keep releasing them. And they show us exactly what we know was done. And the Twitter files show the same thing. You had government agencies having private businesses censor their political opponents. And that, my friends, is not okay.
Here's a statement to Congress that Matt Taibbi had made at one point regarding this. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderate requests from every corner of government. The FBI, DHS, HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same, including Stanford's Election Integrity Project, NewsGuard, the Global Disinformation Index, and others, many taxpayer-funded. So we've got a problem, and it's coming out because of this case and because of Matt Taibbi, who isn't necessarily a constitutionalist. So it's kind of an interesting alliance here.
Well, I'd say he probably is a constitutionalist. He just is a liberal, I would say a leftist version of that. He's more of a collectivist, but he understands the Constitution quite well. But at the end of the day, the thing about Matt Taibbi is he's got journalistic integrity. He's objective. He cares about the truth. And I respect the heck out of his journalism, and I always have. I've followed him for years.
Now, what happens when someone is nervous and scared? Well, they start name calling, right? They start getting really crazy. So Stacey Plaskett, the ranking member of the House Judiciary Subcommittee, started badgering, insulting, smearing, and baiting Matt and Schellenberger like Joe McCarthy in drag. Trembling with hatred, she accused them of being members of some sort of Substack-based death squad that poses a direct threat to people who oppose them. Terrorizing, they were accused of terrorizing Yoel Roth, a former Twitter censorship czar, and unleashing homophobia and anti-Semitism on him. And then she launched into a spittle-flecked rant about January 6th and threatening our democracy until she was restrained by James Jordan. So, and while this is Congress, this is separate from the case, they both tie into each other. It's the reason why I'm bringing this in. Because it's actually something I was going to talk about, but go ahead.
Yeah, that testimony in front of Jordan's committee was great. My favorite exchange was a Democratic Congressman Goldman, who's one of the wealthiest people in politics, bought himself a congressional seat. Basically says there is absolutely no proof of any government, any member of the government asking for censorship. And right. Jim Jordan just jumps all over it because he's got the receipts right in front of him. And it was a pretty fiery exchange. I should have brought that on. It would have been worth doing, but I'm not going to look it up now. Anyway, so that's Missouri. That's some of the background. But the bottom line is your government is using your money, and they do this through these non-government organizations. These are not NGOs. The government gives these agencies money, these NGOs money, millions of dollars, and sometimes more. And those NGOs then create these lists of who to be censored and banned. Right. It is a direct subsidy from the federal government that is silencing their political opponents. Doug, do tyrants do? Is that something we do in a free society, or is that something tyrants
Not
do?
at all. In fact, as you were talking, I was thinking of certain names. Hitler, Stalin, Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. This is the actions of tyrants. Now, what's really nice about it, not that there's anything nice about what they're doing, but what's nice about what's happening is not only the Missouri v. Biden case and that testimony where Jim Jordan was all over it, but also this. The mainstream media is calling for the arrest and prosecution of British health minister for COVID crimes. That would be, your good friend, Secretary Matt Hancock, which I think we talked about on a different show. So and while this is a separate issue than directly what we're talking about, they're all tied together. It's really all about a system that is giving you one story so that they can do something else. Smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand, whatever you want to call it. And it's getting caught.
Hegelian dialectic. It's interesting that they're going after Hancock, because if that goes to trial, if they start subpoenaing his financial records, which they will, follow the money never fails. I want to see. Right. I want to see where the money flow actually is. We didn't get the vast majority of the health officials, quote unquote, public health officials, all to join in lockstep together to push the worst solutions. They were wrong at every single turn, which is mathematically impossible. So it was done on purpose. And Hancock is basically getting excoriated because he was doing everything he could to hype up the fear to greater than it was.
And here's what's interesting about this. Could you imagine if, ABC News suddenly decided to start calling for stuff like that and almost practically became an ally? That's what's happening in Britain. In this case, it's one of the reporters is Alison Pearson from the Telegraph. The Telegraph, while not necessarily as hard left as maybe something like MSNBC, they're not exactly an ally either. Now, I will admit some of the reporters have a little bit of integrity, and apparently Allison does. And here's what she said on Twitter regarding Mr. Hancock. Even at the height of World War II, government never used propaganda to frighten its own people. This lot did. Kids killed themselves and mental health collapsed. Unforgivable. Matt Hancock should be arrested for willful misconduct in pub office. So, so my question is, to tie it back to now Missouri and Biden and all this other stuff, is what we're seeing regarding Hancock. Is this something that could come to a, Congress near you?
It could be contagion. So the big thing about Missouri v. Biden, before we jump into it, because there's a couple things I want to hit on it, is we often ask, I get asked this question all the time. Okay, we've got a pretty good idea of what the Leviathan has done and what they're trying to do. They haven't been subtle about their plans with the Great Reset, et cetera. We've seen, whether it be Russia or, Hillary hammering her phones, we've seen the death of justice and objectivity, and that's awful. The question always comes up is, so what institution has both the will and the authority to do anything about it? And Missouri v. Biden is showing you how it can be done.
We've been talking about this ever since we've known each other. Who has this ability?
It's the states, and you're seeing the states do it. So whatever state you're in, your attorney general, your governor, your state legislature matters so much. You need to get these people watching the Constitution class. To be quite honest with you, that is the only institution that can take the power back from the Leviathan, is the states, and it's through nullification. There's all kinds of different things they can do. And Stephanie's right. It's the people. We've got to take our power back. And before I jump into Missouri v. Biden, because I do want to show that, there was a poll came out by Rasmussen, and it was a very reasonable pollster that showed 60% of Americans thought the feds were involved in the incident on that 6th day of January. That was before Tucker. That was before Tucker.
Yeah, I remember about it on Saturday, I believe. But anyway, go ahead.
There is a theory in social science that the magic number to change hearts and minds, over half the people are they're the sheeple. They can be swayed one way or the other. You get to 68% of a population holding an opinion, then it really starts to pick up mass. It gets up to 75, 80, 90. Once you have that, you've got a movement, and the truth has been changed. We're at 60 before Tucker. I want Rasmussen to follow up very soon to see where we got to that 68. This is how mass movements occur. And 68% is the magic number, and it's been proven many times. So in this very long filing, 374 pages, we're gonna go through each paragraph one by one, right, Doug?
We are?
No.
Yeah. All I know is that the Supreme Court has heard oral arguments on Biden versus Nebraska, which is also tied to this, and we're starting to see all kinds of things pop up. And the reason why I want to bring this up is only this. One of the things that's popped up is the Dobbs case a lot. And what it's telling me is two things. Number one, the enumeration doctrine is on their minds. Number one. And number two, their Gamble versus United States 2019 case is on their mind. The case is not what's the key. It's what Clarence Thomas had to say in that case. That if a ruling or judgment or a political position is egregiously unconstitutional, it must be overturned. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just going to read some of the headlines of what this filing did. This is a recent filing. The government, the U.S. government, had filed. They're trying to make a motion to dismiss. So the attorneys for Missouri and Louisiana filed a 364-page brief. Kind of an interesting term calling that brief, but it's better than a congressional bill, I guess.
Right.
The campaign of public threats against social media platforms to pressure them to censor more speech on social media. And it goes into a bunch of detail here. Section 230 talks about the Communications Decency Act. The threats from the federal elected officials pressuring platforms to censor speech. And they go through, talk about Nancy Pelosi, how she said, I do think that for the privilege of 230, there has to be a bigger sense of responsibility on it. And it is not out of the question that it could be removed. That is a direct threat to these tech companies that say you will toe the line.
Now, bear with me here because I'm going to play the part of the audience because I want to make sure everybody understands something. Now, this was a case that wasn't originally one case. Wasn't it a number of lawsuits that were all combined into this one case?
You know, I got to be honest with you, Doug. I don't recall the origins. I got
all right. Well, all right. Well, then let me go ahead and say this then. There was a number of qualified lawsuits challenging the federal government's private employer vaccine mandate and other things of that nature. And so the state of Missouri versus Biden has consolidated all of those cases into the one case, represented by, if I remember properly, the Alliance Defending Freedom.
Yeah, we were a little bit concerned because the Attorney General of Missouri, who's one of the two lead attorneys, Eric Schmidt, won his race for Senate in the state of Missouri. And his replacement, we were worried that he'd do as good of a job. Well, apparently those worries were moot because this is a pretty... I read through most of this brief, and it's brutal. You've got Blumenthal, Mazie Hirono, all these people threatening, these big tech companies. There's a couple other big bullet points I wanted to get to. But they're listing just example after example of, basically extortion to basically censor your political opponents. We don't do that in America, or I thought we didn't. We got public threats from President Biden and his aides pressuring platforms to censor. All documented. Here's a good one. Biden states in an interview with the New York Times that Section 230 should be revoked because social media companies like Facebook did not do enough to censor supposedly false information in the forms of politicizing ads and criticizing him. And a lot of that has to do with the stuff we talked about earlier about the quote unquote insurrection. There's about two more of these that are worth looking at, but I mean, this is just documents, reams of evidence, and they've got the testimony. They have the White House's public and private pressure campaigns on platforms. We saw Jen Psaki from the podium. She's going to have to give testimony. One of the things the government is trying to argue is, well, does the head of all of these departments have to testify? And they're saying, could you not get the information from an underling? And in some cases, this judge is ruling that direction. In other cases, he's saying, no, these people have to go. But with Jen Psaki, who's no longer a member of the government, she is going to be testifying, and she is fighting so hard.
Yeah, I was looking at a line on this case the other day, and I did a little highlight, and I just put it up on my other computer screen. Actually, I have two computers that I run, so I can look at documents separately, so that I'm not like messing with my bandwidth here. And it says one of the reasons the court entered this order was that Psaki publicly admitted that such communications from White House officials are occurring by stating, for example, that members of our senior staff are flagging problematic posts for Facebook and presenting asks about social media censorship, and that such engaging regularly in such communications will continue. That's some brutal stuff. That's the kind of stuff we've been saying has been going on, and they have been claiming they haven't been doing. And that based on what you just said, that means that Psaki will definitely have to take the stand.
Yes, she will. This one tweet's worth talking about with this comment. This is from Rob Flaherty, White House official. He sends this over to who's he sending it to? Some of the big tech ops. I think it was Twitter even. Said, "Hey folks, wanted to flag the below tweet, and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process for having it removed." This is a tweet from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's got a little bit of credibility on the topics. One last one, and we can move on to something else. But this is just reams. I mean, this case is so rock solid. Now, this judge, whose name I'm blanking on right now, has getting some pushback from a court of appeals above him, but he's holding his ground really well, and he's on some very strong legal grounds. Flaherty's featured all over this, and Slavitt. There was one last one I wanted to get to. And every single one of these allegations is just so outside of what the Constitution or any kind of a free society should ever allow.
I wonder if you're looking for the same one I have. Let me, while
Go
you're
ahead.
looking, read mine. Ironically, the White House's relentless pressure campaign came back to bite it. Like a serpent eating its own tail, the White House pushed social media companies to censor so aggressively that eventually the president's own Instagram account was inadvertently swept into his own net. In July 2021, White House officials noticed that follower growth at POTUS had slowed. In response to their inquiries, Instagram explained that it was an internal technical issue that we can't get into, but that's now resolved. Quote, "Are you guys effing serious?" Flaherty exploded. "I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it today." A few weeks later, Flaherty got his answer. Apparently, after months of haranguing by White House officials, and it gives a list of things that we need to see. Meta, the parent corporation of Facebook and Instagram, ramped up its censorship of COVID-19 jab hesitancy. Instagram deployed an algorithm that used posting far above normal vaccine-related content as a proxy for promoting. That's directly from the document that you're looking at. And then on another page, while you once again, or did you find what you're looking for?
I did.
All right, go ahead.
This is the Jen Psaki one. The public pressure and threats from Press Secretary Jennifer Psaki. The White House was evidently quite unhappy with this response and the results of its pressure campaign behind closed doors. A few days later, the White House took its pressure campaign public. On May 5th, 2021, Jen Psaki publicly reminded Facebook and the other platforms of the legal consequences hanging over its head if it did not censor, air quote, misinformation more aggressively. The president's view is that the major platforms have a responsibility related to health and safety of all Americans to stop amplifying untrustworthy content. Who determines what is untrustworthy comment? Who determines what is misinformation? And disinformation and misinformation, especially related to COVID-19, vaccinations, and elections.
And once again, it screams being Hitleric in many ways. Then what I was going to read while you scroll a little bit more is due to over-enforcement, the algorithm removed some otherwise eligible accounts for being recommended as an account to follow, including, in a stroke of irony, the president's Instagram account. Needless to say, having aggressively demanded the censorship of others for months, the White House was absolutely livid when its own speech was accidentally swept into the net. And then another part where Psaki is a key individual with actual knowledge of such White House officials and their communications, and plaintiffs have requested disclosure of this information from the White House secretary since July. But defendants took the position in interrogatory responses that Psaki was by then a former employee. And then it goes on to talk about, how she's no longer, was a part of it, so you can't use her, and da-da-da. That's their argument. Well,
So
go ahead.
Do you remember when the censorship regime really kicked into high gear?
I wasn't born yet.
No.
You mean of this over this stuff? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's
that would
been
have
there
been
all along, folks.
that would have been January 8th of 2021.
Right.
When they basically with Twitter banned took away Donald Trump's account, and that's when
Right.
they really started bouncing everybody.
About a year into the first emergence of the COVID mess.
And despite unprecedented censorship in this country, the vast majority of people see through the veil.
Mhm.
And that brings us up to our great question about, what I like to talk about is Gutenberg 2.0, and I think now's a good time to latch into that. Throughout history, the control of information was in the hands of the quote unquote elites, the Leviathan, the lords, not the serfs, the church. I
think he froze again for a moment.
Catholic Church controlled what you know about the Bible. Did I go blank again?
Yes, you did.
Okay, the news was disseminated. Okay, sorry about that. Anyways,
you can tell by my grin, I'm banking.
People couldn't communicate, outside of their own little hamlets and everything like that. And then all of a sudden, Gutenberg invents the printing press, and the Bible becomes the most read book in history, and we have this incredible spread.
We're finding out what's going on in other parts of not only our communities and country, but the world.
People are starting to talk and share ideas, and it's amazing. And we get these things called the Reformation and the Renaissance. And the Enlightenment happens, and from that, these great thinkers inspired things like 1776 and the Constitution, and the tyrants didn't like losing their grip on the flow of information, because that's how they control power. That is what the censorship is all about. So they start buying in the 18th and 19th century. They start buying up all the newspapers, and they start getting their power back. We have examples of people like J.P. Morgan buying up 25, Eastern newspapers. Him and some of his buddies in the shipbuilding and munitions industry, so they could push us into World War I using the newspapers. Then radio and TV comes, and of course, the Leviathan has a monopoly on those things, and they start having control of the airwaves and people's opinions again. They controlled what was written in the books and taught in the schools and the universities, and we ended up spending most of the 20th century at war. Funny how that works. Well, then the internet comes around, and that was going to be the ultimate tool for them to get their final push for one world government.
Right.
But something funny happened along the way. They lost control of it, because we're still communicating with each other outside of their, control, and more people are waking up every single day to the truth. So I call this Gutenberg 2.0. This is the printing press. This is a great opportunity for mankind. If we can survive the assault that's coming at us, and the truth is coming out. It is out. We just got to get more people to believe it.
All right, very good.
So I had we were talking the other night, and darn it, I lost it. I had it on my other computer. Let me see if I can find that real quick, and you go on to your next story, because it's worth it.
It's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Well, earlier I had mentioned Bill Gates and, how people need to live in poverty when it comes to, these to save the world kind of thing. And he's not sure they'll be willing to do it. So here's another headline that's kind of tied to that. I'm terrified. New York City residents say city's new climate law could ruin their lives. New York City climate law regulating emissions is set to impose harsh penalties on larger buildings, many of them residential, that don't comply by 2024, forcing building boards and residents to make difficult financial decisions, according to the New York Times. Local Law 97 is part of the city's 2019 Climate Mobilization Act and aims to reduce carbon emissions by 40% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Net zero isn't a possibility. That's beside the point. Got it? Do you feel any gas? Like I said, net zero is impossible.
Net zero is extinction.
Exactly. By targeting buildings which are believed to be the city's largest polluters. So New York City's full of big buildings, and they're the biggest polluters. Hey, let's get rid of the big buildings, or at least make sure they don't, make any gassy emissions. But the strict regulations put building managers in difficult position, forcing them to choose between costly energy upgrades and massive fines. One building manager, Craig Hart, told New York Times he could install solar panels on a roof. That's going to need a $650,000 replacement in the coming year, and then install a new boiler system. They'll have to be replaced in a few years as emission standards become more stringent, or face massive fines for noncompliance. So we're talking close to $1 million for this guy just to upgrade the building. I've been looking at every option I could think of, and I don't know what to do, he told the outlet. I want to be zero carbon. So he wants to comply. It's not like he's, an enemy of saving the planet. He's saying, hey, I want to do this, but I can't afford it. It's not an easy road. Glen Oaks Village, a collective of more than 2,900 apartments in Queens, plans to spend $24.5 million replacing its gas and oil boilers over the next 5 to 10 years, but will still incur an anticipated $700,000 per year in fines because they won't be able to afford to do it fast enough. I'm terrified of it, Arlene Bett, a 60-year-old longtime resident who paid off her one-bedroom apartment in the complex, but worries about her $500 monthly maintenance fee growing. I will not be able to afford it, and there's no place cheaper. Bob Friedrich, the board president, told the New York Times that penalties would force the board to sharply raise maintenance fees. They are not looking at the real life cost of this. Buildings produce about 70% of New York City's greenhouse gas emissions, and buildings over 25,000 feet, which the city is targeting, produce about half of all building emissions, according to the New York Times. About 60% of those buildings are residential and rely largely on fossil fuels for heating and cooling. They could face up to $60 million of total fines annually under Local Law 97. The city of New York did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Now, bring this up. Why? Because I want to take us all the way back to that poll that you mentioned earlier. This is why those poll numbers are high. Things like that. I'm getting ready to pull that poll up right now. So, and I know it's unrelated because that poll was about J6, but it's related. J6 narrative crumbles. 61% of all voters believe feds helped incite riot. I want them to do a poll now. How many of you think that the climate laws are going to destroy our economy or destroy your way of life? Something of that nature. Or has that poll been put out there?
Yeah, we've had a number of those. Actually, God, I want to remember. It was about in 2015 because Obama was in office, and he was out there beating the drums about all this carbon stuff like that. And they took a poll, reasonable one, and it was like 59% of people thought it was absolute hogwash and did not believe the narrative. And yet they run around saying the science is settled. That is not how science works, people. So I found what I was looking for. If you're done on this topic.
Well, for the most part, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a fun talk. We can get back to it.
It is something that could take up the entire hour if we let it, and we're already at the hour mark. So
yeah. Well, I've got a hard stop at about 10 till, so we got about 13 minutes. If that's okay. So we talk about how great the flow of information is, but that's not always the case. And that the Bible was the most printed book during that period of the Reformation. The second most printed book was one called the. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share the screen on this one. Doug and I were I was trying to remember this last night when we were having a conversation with another Brady. Apparently, we're replicating ourselves.
I mean, even some of his mannerisms and habits are similar to this Brady. It's really weird. Right down to the not wearing closed-toed shoes. It's funny stuff.
Right.
But I will admit, everybody, I like them both. All right, they're all right.
Yeah, Brady. I'm not going to go into the song again. So the name of the second most read book.
All right, just talk, Marsha.
Here's a story. God, I got so sick of that song when I was a kid. The Malleus Maleficarum was the second most read book in that period of time. It was written by Heinrich Kramer and James Sprenger. And I just want to read the top paragraph. The Malleus Maleficarum, which is Latin for the hammer of witches or witch's hammer, Hexenhammer in German, is one of the most famous medieval treatises on witches. It was written in 1486 by Kramer and Sprenger and first published in Germany in 1487. Its main purpose was to challenge all arguments against the existence of witchcraft and to instruct magistrates on how to identify, interrogate, and convict witches. This led to the Spanish Inquisition. This led to the Salem witch trials. This led to all kinds of atrocities. It was, it was a second most well-read book of the time. So not all information is good information. And I bring this up because discernment, integrity, and truly having the ability to understand the difference between right and wrong make all the difference in the world and the society. And I, for one, think that Christianity is the key towards that. But anyways, I thought that was very interesting. With the second most interesting book, the second most read book at the time was because there was an awful lot of bad things done in the name of that. So literacy for its own sake is one thing, but it's got to be done with discernment, objectivity, etc.
Well, and this kind of brings me back to something I talk about all the time with my Constitution classes. So I'm glad we have a Constitution crowd here. The Constitution was all about the proper distribution of power, balance. And so, it's funny because we talk about the right and the left. And we actually had a conversation about this the other day, because the far left is oligarchy, the far right is anarchy. But what happens is anarchy ultimately becomes the far left because the very people who created the chaos, when people start calling out for order, say, oh, we'll give you the order. And it becomes an oligarchy. Democracy also, which based on the political concepts I'm talking about, political spectrum, that's the right word, political spectrum of the right left, that has developed over time, 100% being the far left, 0% being the far right. When it comes to power of government, democracy is actually on the right. It is right wing, if you want to call it that. And it also ultimately always becomes an oligarchy. Matter of fact, Karl Marx has a quote that said that democracy is the road to socialism. What the Constitution was about being the balance between those extremes, about creating a system that had enough government to keep us from messing it up, but so little government that it didn't become an oligarchy. It was about balance. It was about a proper distribution of power. And in anything, that's the case. Now we get into biblical readings, and what we learn if we are a regular reader of biblical text is that the Bible teaches moderation. You don't go to the extremes. There's moderation, and we can even use some examples on certain things where something might in moderation not be right, but in extreme not be right, but in moderation it's actually a good thing. And so that's a biblical concept. The idea of what the Constitution is, moderation, balance, it's a biblical concept. And that's what we need to be working towards. And what we've got right now is we've got extremes that are battling each other, but they make it look like they're battling each other. Here's the problem. They're actually feeding out of the same trough.
Well, that's a pretty good message to wrap on. Let's go ahead, and we got a lot of stuff to promote. So let's roll into that, and we'll wrap up. So, as promised, I have my new channel up on Rumble.
Woo-hoo!
Yes, it's under the Rumble channel is Brady Fox FOXX, and the most recent video I have on there was a presentation I gave a couple weeks ago on part 3 of my series, Rise of called The Shadow State. This one is Rise of the CIA.
And this is the one you've been encouraging me to watch, right?
Well, I encourage you to watch all of it. I need you to be up to speed on important topics.
Yeah, okay,
if I'm going to do a show with you, come on.
Yes, sir. Notice how he responded to that. You are such a relaxed, straight shooter that it's hilarious. I'm like all over the place. I'm gesticulating. I'm making noise. And he's like, phew. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, Doug, I'm at peace with the world.
Very
I'm
good.
at peace with the universe. I
Very
don't need
good.
to gesticulate. So that
I even gesticulate when I'm on the radio. But anyway,
well, this is actually true because of when he's on the radio on the Saturday show. When I've been on with him, we actually have a video going on at the same time, and I watch him doing his gesticulations. What was the word I used? What was the word I used for Doug? Doug is very loquacious, whereas I'm a little bit more concise. So we're good enough friends.
That's why we work well together.
Yeah, I don't worry who says more, who gets more airtime during an hour, who gets a higher percentage. We just have different styles, but they complement each other, so it's good.
Yeah.
So I am going to have my Substack out, probably my first Substack, and I got several articles ready to go. So that's going to be happening too. This is all part of a broader effort to grow the message that Doug and I are trying to preach. He's had his minute, what we call his way of teaching the Constitution is his ministry, and I've become I don't know if about disciple or acolyte. I don't know what the right term is, but partner in crime, comrade in arms, I think is right. And because I agree with that. I like comrade in arms. Since I agree so much with what Doug says, and and it totally complements the stuff that I talk about.
Why did I suddenly get fuzzy? That's weird. Go ahead. I'm sorry. My focus went out of my camera on my autofocus. So, oh well.
We've decided to work together soon. One of my favorite things is every single time you watch a show, they say, "Okay, tell everyone how you can find them." And Doug's about to do that. I said, "Doug, tell us where you can find you. Tell everyone where we can find you." And he's going to go on for about 2 minutes and list all his websites. Well, we've got one of the things our new site's going to have is go to this page at blah blah blah.com, and you can see all of my contacts right here, like all on one page. So it becomes a 10-second presentation. You can talk more about the content than the URL. But anyways, we got a lot of really good stuff going on, and I am disappointed because I completed my new studio today, and it was up and running perfectly until Doug got here, and instead I had to go back to the old-fashioned terrible background because otherwise you guys would have had to been waiting as I figured out the tech problems. But on Sunday night, I can promise you, on Patriot Soapbox at 5 p.m. Pacific, when we go through Anti-Federalist number 9 on Alan Meyer's show for the Republic, I will have my new studio up and running, and I have gone high tech. I've got you'll enjoy it. I can get rid of these hamster ears once and for all. Doug, where can they find you?
DouglasVGibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com, KMET radio on Saturdays from 1 to 3 p.m. at KMET1490am.com. K-Praise on Saturday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, KPRZ.com. And if you want, you can find that last show all over the place on the different podcast channels. I'm talking iHeart, Odyssey, Audible, Spotify, Listen Notes. List goes on and on and on. All you got to do is ask for Mr. Constitution Hour by Douglas V. Gibbs. And I'm actually, there we go. Now my picture cleared up for some reason. But anyway, and what we're doing right now is we're going through history. I'm actually going through United States history with each episode. We've gone through the Constitution twice on that show. And now it's time to go through some history. When I get to the end of history, then I'll go back to the Constitution one more time. KPRZ.com. And of course, I can be found all over other places, but you can go to DouglasVGibbs.com and find the radio link and the video link and all that. By the way, YouTube.com/DouglasVGibbs is one of my YouTube channels. That all said, I have to end it the way I like to end it. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Any final words before we hit the clicker?
Cheers, everyone. Thanks for being here. And just real quick, if you may have noticed that Andrew, the regular host, this is his channel. He's going to start having his different content, sometimes with us, sometimes without, as we go off and do our own things. He's renamed the channel. He was going to call it The Resistance, but I explained to him that that's exactly what the left called it once Hillary Clinton lost in 2016 on the homepage. Oops,
you froze there, so repeat the last 30 seconds. Or 15 seconds, or whatever it was.
What was the last thing I said?
I don't know. I was reading the chat room.
Oh, Andrew has renamed the channel he's a Citizen 1776. It's now going to be called Citizen Talk, which is good because Doug and I are not going to be on his show forever. And we'll be occasional
and
guests.
Probably not as much in the near future. And I have to say this now because I was going to say this at the beginning and I didn't. I'm not a fan of the new logo because the fist with the cross. I know the cross is there, but that fist is a communist fist. I'll talk to Andrew. We'll see if we can discuss that. I wasn't a fan of that. So that's my disclaimer. This host may not agree with any and all things that showed up on your page because I'm not a fan of that logo. But anyway, I love Andrew. Absolutely love the kid. But I shouldn't say kid, but compared to us, I guess he is.
Yeah, he's a spring chicken. All right, everybody. Have yourselves a great
we'll
weekend.
See y'all later.
Hope you all can catch us on Sunday night. It should be really good with Anti-Federalist number 9, and it should be a good show. Cheers, everyone.